Cancer is a very deliberate, targeted evolutionary mechanism that will do anything necessary to survive. It is purposeful, it is adaptive, and we have been treating it like it's dumb for the last 40 years. We have had a war on cancer. We've spent $250 billion, and a stage 3 or stage 4 cancer patient is no better now than they were in 1930. We do not understand the fundamental nature of cancer. If we did, we would be winning this war much better than we are. And that's why we've organized the Cancer and Evolution Symposium on Zoom, October 14 to 16, 2020. We are bringing together the world's most progressive evolutionary biologists with the world's most progressive oncologists and cancer researchers in an interdisciplinary forum where we are going to put the two sides together. These two groups need to talk to each other, and this is finally happening now. Everybody's had this experience. Your Aunt Martha has cancer, and everybody's shocked, and everybody's in turmoil, and everybody's in mourning. But she goes to the doctor, and they put her on chemo. 2 months later, oh, her numbers are improved drastically, and there's cakes and pies and celebrations. 4 months later, she's dead. What happened? Well, the cancer cells they were killing got killed, but the ones they couldn't kill turned into Viet Cong warriors. So when you hit tumors with chemotherapy, you might kill 98% of the cells, but the 2% that are left will go from one species to 1,000 species in a matter of weeks. And now you're fighting 1,000 kinds of cancer instead of one, and that is mission impossible. The current evolutionary paradigm doesn't have any context for this. What if somebody set off a bomb in the local shopping mall, a terrorist organization sets off a bomb, and then what if the police just said, oh, I think that was just a random accident? What would you think of that? Like, what kind of strategy is that for battling terrorists? Like terrorists do very unpredictable things, but they're not purposeless. You can think of cancer as evolution's dark cousin. If you don't understand the original cousin, how are you ever going to understand the dark cousin? There has been a silent revolution in evolutionary biology, and it literally goes back to the 1940s, but it bubbled along very quietly for literally 60 years until within the last 10 years, it really started to turn into a rumble. And there was just a rising level of dissatisfaction with the modern synthesis. It's almost as though science took a wrong turn in the 30s and 40s, assuming that evolution was random and purposeless. And people like Barbara McClintock and Lynn Margulis and Carl Woese vigorously dissented from the mainstream views. And they said, no, people, we have this wrong. People inside science know this. And it's time for the modern synthesis thinking to also be purged from the cancer scene, because there are a lot of assumptions about how cells work, how life works that are fundamentally wrong. And until we correct those misconceptions, we're going to stay on the same wrong tracks. We don't need to spend another $250 billion in another 40 years to find out, oh, well, that didn't work. We know it doesn't work now. Did you know that the question of why can salamanders grow their legs back if you cut them off and you can in humans, and where does cancer come from, are highly related questions? You would think that an animal that can regenerate cut off limbs would be so generative that it would also produce cancer, but actually it turns out the opposite is true. It turns out that animals that can regenerate their limbs tend to not have cancer. That would be an example of the kind of unconventional thinking that we are bringing to this conference. George Church is the leading geneticist at Harvard, and he is giving a talk about metabolic processes that he's been able to speed up from taking 300 days down to taking 4 days. Okay, so that's a 75x speed in changes of part of an organism. Jinsung Liu has developed an analogy. It's like a three-way analogy between cancer, evolution, and embryology. He's actually connecting the three of these things together and seeing the elements that are common to all three. And it's remarkable. Michael Levin is inducing cancer in tadpoles and then reversing it. Now imagine what would happen if that same technology, that same methodology was applied to pancreas, liver, prostate, breast, stomach, skin cancer. What could happen? Well, it requires a completely different way of thinking about biology and physiology. And in this conference, we're not afraid to ask these questions. You know, there's all kinds of alternative medicine things and naturopathic things and holistic things, and mostly they exist on the fringes of science. And some of them are valid, some of them aren't. But this is solid, empirical, testable science. And it is in the mainstream, but it's been ignored. And it's not going to be ignored anymore. Steve Jobs and Bill Gates didn't come from the computer industry. Fred Smith, the guy who started Federal Express, didn't come from the shipping industry. The guys that started Uber didn't come from the taxi industry. Elon Musk didn't come from the car industry. The founders of Google didn't come from the search engine industry. Innovations always come from the outside. And it's actually a fact of biology that even evolutionary innovations come from symbiotic mergers. And as a matter of principle, it's almost impossible for the cancer industry as it currently exists to solve cancer because it is mired in its own assumptions. And so we are bringing people who are on the cutting edge of cancer, who disagree with the mainstream views, together with a bunch of people from evolutionary biology, morphology, physiology, genetics, physics, chemistry, even astrobiology. And we are having an interdisciplinary conference where we can bring outside views in a symbiotic merger and really seek to integrate everything that we know. I would call the people participating in this conference blue chip renegades. They are some of the most respected scholars in the world, but they differ from the mainstream views. I was talking to a doctor a couple of weeks ago about cancer treatment, and he said one of his great frustrations is that a full, double-blind, proper set of clinical trials to fully vet a cancer therapy costs $100 million. There aren't a lot of entities out there that have $100 million to spend on a trial like that. There are a lot of drugs that are never going to make $100 million, even if they can successfully combat cancer. And so they're just not going to be run through the set of trials. There's a lot of frustration over the fact that large drug companies strongly influence a lot of the legislation that happens. Another thing a lot of cancer researchers are very frustrated with is the amount of suffering that people have to endure in the current cancer therapies. I believe that someday we will regard chemotherapy and radiation as the modern equivalent of bloodletting that they did 200 years ago. You know, an awful lot of people are willing to raise awareness, you know, run in a cancer run or participate in a fundraiser or whatever, and that's wonderful. You know, we're not asking you to run in a race. We're not asking you to donate money, but what we would like you to do is share this. Why? Because we believe that there is a student or a young person out there who will be inspired by what we are doing, and they will go on to take these learnings and these innovations and drive them far forward, far further than anybody's taken them right now, and actually do something about this. It's good to raise money and awareness for cancer, but I think we are really on the cutting edge here, and we are really on the cusp of some major breakthroughs. Everybody who's involved in this conference feels that we've missed the punchline on cancer. In 1944, Barbara McClintock figured out that a corn plant could rearrange its own DNA and repair itself and direct its own evolution. And when she shared that information at a conference in 1951, she was kind of figuratively booed off the stage. The same thinking that got her booed off the stage is still quite prevalent in old school evolutionary biology and modern cancer research. The taboo was to suggest that a corn plant cell was smart. Well, not only are corn plants smart, cancer cells are smart too. In fact, cancer cells have outsmarted the best scientists in the world for the last 40 years, and it's time for this to stop. The presentations in the Cancer and Evolution Symposium will consistently challenge established beliefs and established models. Anyone who attends this virtual conference with curiosity and an open mind is going to find this a revolutionary event. I don't know any way that anybody attending this conference, including most of the speakers, can't watch the sessions and learn something new literally every 15 minutes. It's time for real breakthroughs in the fight against cancer. It's time for the needless loss of lives to end. It's time for the unnecessary suffering to end. And that's why we're holding this conference.